This is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrate and power of will, 5% pleasure, 50% pain, and 100% reason to do a PhD at McGill. Woo! So Matheus was just asking me why we even thought about this. I was going to image a northern blot in my to crosslink something, okay. And our crosslinker is broken. You don't need to know what a crosslinker is at all. The crosslinker is broken, so I go to Quinn's lab, and then we start talking about how the system is rigged and that our mental health is very bad, and we talk about how grad students and profs are self-selected for like being rugged people and to basically have mental issues. Not having mental issues, but being being deeply troubled, like 30% of us, like we're going to talk in this episode. And I said, yeah, it's 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrate and power of will. Because it's 50% pain. That's basically what grad school is.
So you guys just came up with like that last line. It's the only difference, right?
It is.
At the end.
Yeah. I came up with it earlier. Yeah, but
earlier. Okay, nice.
Phil's a poet.
I'm a poet.
Next, Eminem.
So this week on the podcast, we have Quinn Abram once again to talk about mental health. It was his own initiative, and we just jumped on it because it's always a good opportunity to talk about mental health among scientists and graduate students. We discuss a study that was done by UC Berkley about this, but we also go deeper into our personal troubles and on conjectures on what we think is going on and how we could change it. Mm-hmm. This is Orders of Magnitude, the science podcast in which we don't talk about science this week. Have a good one. Okay, Quinn, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks again for having me, guys.
You're the first person who's here for 2 episodes, so I hope you're very happy with that.
I'm truly honored.
And we are definitely not recording these episodes back to back, one after the other.
I'm just wearing the same clothes every single day. Yeah. We're all wearing the same clothes every single day.
Yeah.
So today, a more serious topic. What do you want to talk to us about?
Yeah, so today I wanted to take a bit of time to talk about mental health and specifically in grad school and trying to deal with that, because it's an issue that I think hits all of us probably at some point, if not more pervasively, but not something that's really talked about a lot.
So how did it came into your life to think about mental health as a scientist? Because I know it's all-encompassing for most of us, but we tend not to think about it too much, even if it's such a big part of our lives.
Exactly. I think for me, actually, it's more so living it a bit right now. Grad school in of itself can be stress-inducing, whatnot, and I've been doing it for 5 years now and kind of got that part down. But I had a couple big personal changes in my life, which have really kind of, shaken me and confidence, identity, etc. And then, trying then to still meet those commitments in graduate school, to meet them socially, whatnot, all of a sudden it's like seeing the world in a different light. And, you kind of realize that, we're human, we're all going through this at some different point in time. But it's become a bit more personal for me, certainly.
Let's put people a bit in context. We were talking about some statistics beforehand. Can we go over those statistics again?
Yeah, certainly. It was interesting. I sent you guys a study that basically they looked at a large cohort of students, and it was 30,000 undergraduates and 15,000 graduate students, basically the first year of the COVID pandemic, and comparing that to the year prior. And they surveyed these students to basically be able to assess them for either major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder. And for both of those, they identified in graduate students in the first year of the pandemic that those numbers were north of 30%. So as we're walking around our hallways day to day, 1 in 3 people that we're meeting is dealing with that. And you usually never know it in most cases. People get good at putting up a facade and just kind of putting their head down and getting through that. But that's pretty pervasive around us. And, you know, interestingly, even just the year before the pandemic, those numbers were still north of 20%. So, you know, so this is definitely, I mean, an issue in life in general, but, you know, amongst graduate students and whatnot, it's definitely something that affects us and is kind of, I think, important to talk about.
Of course. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's crazy how much when we don't assess ourselves, we might not know we have general anxiety or major depressive disorder. But if we give us those very like those tests made by psychologists to assess that, north of 30% of people, you're saying,
Exactly.
have these disorders in grad school. And it's even more pervasive. I was talking about that earlier. In people who are like intersectional, for example, it's a bit more pervasive in women. I've seen Black, Indigenous people of color, the BIPOC people have a bigger percentage, up to 50% more people than the general population. Also, non-binary and transgender were like the most disheartening numbers, at up to 70% of these people were either or both actually general anxiety and major depression, which is crazy.
It is, and it, you know, it's I think it takes you back a bit, and it, you know, it's sad too. You know, that these are other human beings that are dealing with this. Mm-hmm. And you know, I think for me, having the privilege of being a white heterosexual male, it's something that, you know, I don't see on a day-to-day basis. You know, it's not something that jumps out, but you know, it is sad that people are having to go through that.
Yeah. I always think that all three of us, I think we're all heterosexual males, white, and it's so easy life when you're a heterosexual male and you just go on and you don't realize how things are for people that don't fall into the same category. And I think it's amazing that we're just here talking about this, because with such easiness of life, I think we have the opportunity, not only the opportunity, but maybe even the duty to go and start using that extra energy that we have to, you know, talk about these things, make people more aware of the subject, and help the ones that are going through hard times to, you know, have a life that is better and that is easier. What do you think causes the numbers to be so high in graduate school for mental health?
Yeah, so certainly I think there's a number of factors there. I've listed some of them here. We can kind of go through them, probably riff off. I think the first one is that for a lot of graduate students, you know, you're used to being a high achiever. And, you know, you go through high school and undergrad, and, you know, for many of us, you know, you're used to getting high marks. You kind of put your head down, work hard, and you achieve. And you get to graduate school, and I mean, particularly in STEM fields where you're doing experiments, you start to experience failure for maybe the first time in your life for a lot of people. You know, whenever we have new students in lab, that's one of the first things I tell them. It's like, things won't work. They will fail. That's fine. As long as you're learning something from it, you know, that's the important bit. But, you know, all of a sudden you're in the lab, you're starting out, you're somewhere new, you know, you want to impress your boss, your lab mates, and your experiment fails. You do it again, it doesn't work again. And then maybe a third time it doesn't work. And then all of a sudden another experiment doesn't work. And all of a sudden you're in the back of your mind, you're sitting there's like, is the materials I'm using? Is my plan wrong? Is it me? Like, am I capable of doing this? And that self-doubt creeps in, and you know, it's hard to shake until you get that success to prove to you that it's not.
Honestly,
true.
I have never been as anxious as when I first started in a lab as an undergrad. And exactly like you say, you do your first experiment, you're super confident because everything, I'm a white heterosexual man, everything has always worked for me. And all of a sudden the experiment doesn't work. You try it over again, it doesn't work. And you're like, oh, it's over now. Yeah. My streak of success that I've had since childhood is over. And I got so desperate that summer, and every single day I would walk up to the lab, and not only because our lab is up a hill, my heart would be pounding while I was walking up to the lab. Today, is my agarose gel gonna work? It's only like this small experiment, we call it cloning, it's super routine. We talked about it in class. You put the 3 reagents together. It's supposed to work. Why isn't it working?
Yeah.
God damn. And yeah, I was whatever. So I really related to what you just said.
Yeah. And I think it's worse when it's something like that is, technically easy.
Trivial, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually talking with my girlfriend a couple of days ago. I think we were biking next to our lab where we work, and I made the comment, "Does your heart start beating faster when we bike through here?" And she's like, "No," and I was like, "What? Of course it does. We're going like next to the lab. You get nervous when you're close to the lab." And yeah. I mean, science is hard. Things go wrong. My PI tells us this all the time. She's like, things will go wrong. Get ready. Okay, fine. How can people cope with this type of thing? How do you guys think we can? What can we do to make life easier in grad school?
I think, it kind of starts where we're right now, talking about that, normalizing those feelings. That we're all human. And we're all going through this. We're all going through it together. I think, it sounds like we're all lucky to have good PIs that are supportive in that respect. It's not always the case. But, you hope between PIs, between your lab mates, that like you're supportive of that failure. You're helping someone to work through it. And, it's hard because, you can sit there and tell them your face is blue. That it's like, it's okay. And that won't always register, but still being there and supporting, I think is critical. And also, if you are a more senior member within a lab, I think that responsibility falls on you even heavier.
For the people out there who didn't get that or weren't in science or whatever, PI, principal investigator, professor, basically our mentors.
It's the owner of the lab.
And this is, I think, another factor, right, on why mental health isn't that good. I think many professors are very good mentors, but they never get selected for being good mentors, as opposed to teachers in lower cycles of education, right?
Oh, precisely. You basically spend 10 years becoming extremely technically proficient to qualify you for a job in which that is on the lowest of your list of priorities, and you have to be a good manager, teacher, mentor. You're applying all of a sudden for funding, and you're dealing with procuring materials and space and all of these soft skills. And, you hope that those are selected for along the way. But I might argue that if anything, it might be selected against in some ways, it doesn't track. And that is in life in general. Just because you're a good analyst or whatever doesn't mean the next rung is for you, right? They're different skills for every job. And, also PIs are under a lot of pressure as well, particularly early in their careers.
100%. It's not a unilateral issue in which we can blame everything on one part of the system, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's where I think it comes out. Like the PIs, in the first 7 years, they're basically fighting for their lives, doing a new job that they're kind of picking a lot of the skills on the fly, and you kind of live and learn. And I think probably as with us as well, you sometimes learn some lessons quicker and easier than others. But they're dealing with stress. Your lab mates as well are dealing with stress. Don't always deal with that well. And you have this ecosystem of people under a lot of pressure. And, you're kind of looking for, I guess, a net positive or net negative there in terms of who is able to deal with this and is there an overall network of support. And you hope that you're able to find that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was browsing through Reddit the other day, and there's this subreddit, really cool subreddit. It's called our lab rats, something like that. Someone posted the hours of work that they do per week over the course of their PhD.
That's toxic.
Man, over time, they were doing by the end, they were doing over 70 hours a week, working 7 days a week. I'm curious to know you guys here. How much do you guys work? Is it because a lot of people are like, oh yes, I do 12 hours in the lab every day. That's not healthy. It's not sustainable.
No, and also I would argue just not necessary either. It's a marathon, not a sprint. For me, COVID's definitely disrupted things, but
Yeah.
my previous MO was basically to work what I can call a 40-hour plus work week. On average, I'm probably working closer to 45 to 50. I'll work my, 8 to 5 or whatnot, and sometimes I'll stay late. Sometimes I'll come on a weekend for a couple hours. But for the most part, I'm kind of sticking to that. And also, there are some times in the week where I'm like, I'm not doing work, period. Friday night comes, that's my time. Like, I need time away from this. To be a human living a full, healthy life and, to keep going.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest. And if my PI is listening to this, maybe you won't like it. We'll see. Imed, give me a call. It's fine. I had a lot of trouble with mental health until I started working less than 40 hours a week. Right now, I think on average, I must be working, and this I call working at the bench or being in the lab actively doing stuff. Of course, like there's all the other stuff, reading papers, and also communicating by email, planning experiments. Sometimes you don't do that necessarily at the bench, but at the bench, 30 hours a week. I don't care if that's 3/4 of what is expected on my graduate contract, because I realize that I end up doing much more in these times. And my failure rate of my experiments has gone down also.
Yep.
But it's crazy because if I wouldn't have enough like self-confidence to assert, okay, I'm doing 30 hours a week and I don't give a F about who's gonna judge me for it, I think I would feel very bad and very, very stressed about not being at the lab that much.
Yeah.
So that was my 2 cents about it, but yeah.
No, but I think that's legit. I think people often you'll talk with other students and you hear often people being like, oh yes, I spend like all day in the bench, I'm always doing my experiments. How many of those worked?
Yep.
And fine, you were like in the lab like the whole day. How much did you actually get done? Because if you're just there, there's different types of resources for productivity, I think, in my opinion. You have time, of course. Time is very important, but energy is extremely important. And with energy comes concentration. And if you can't concentrate because you're too tired, because you've been working too much, then you're not producing anything.
We're working with sterile cells. You're working with virus. We're working, pouring incolor solutions into incolor solutions in hundreds of tubes. And everything has to be right. We can't be focused 50 hours a week at the bench. I'm sorry.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I learned that lesson too in my master's. Like there's kind of this feel that you always have to be working to be productive. Like if you're not doing that, like, you're letting down your PI, you're letting yourself down. And I think one of the first lessons I learned is that it's like, if you can figure out the experiment that just goes from step A to D, instead of trying to do A to B to C to D, or to B to C to C to D, that is going to be way healthier for you and going to work much better. And also it's like, I realized it's like, okay, I came in this weekend, I worked in 16 hours this weekend, and this is the one time this experiment that always works didn't work. And then you do that again and again. And it starts to be like, I think the common denominator is that I'm putting all this extra time on the weekend. And it's like, if it's not going to work, what is the point? And why am I now like self-sabotaging the rest of my week to try to make it work?
Yeah, because this is the time you would have meal prepped or wash your clothes or have a beer with friends, come on a podcast,
Yeah. No, I think having a good night of sleep, eating properly, prepare your meals and everything. That's essential for having good energy, good concentration. You do stuff well in the lab. I find it's really good that we're talking about this. Maybe we have some scientists that are listening that feel bad for not going to the lab too often, or for not doing enough work, or because their experiments are not working. You just gotta take a break, regroup yourself, figure the stuff out, and then go and do things calmly. And things just work if you have the energy and the concentration to be there, right?
So these are more things we can do on a personal level, right? Having a better hygiene de vie, life hygiene. But if we want to steer away from blaming the people, because we've seen that there are some systematic factors behind this, what can we do? In the paper that you sent us from UC Berkeley, they have these very broad guidelines that I can read right now.
Yeah.
The first one is basically just allocate more resources to mental health. Second one is expanding telecounseling and acting before, so in prevention. Engaging the staff and the faculty in the process, and working together with students. So those are the 4 that they recommend. It's very broad strokes, so maybe we can talk about how this would translate. I know we're not Suzanne Forti, we're not deans, we're not anything, but they say work with students, so we're students, and here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. They're very broad, but I think it's important. I guess making sure, I think that, you know, the PIs or supervisors have training in this realm. I think A, to be able to identify when there are issues, and B, to know how to be supportive. I think that's something from university down that would be extremely important to graduate students. Like, I'm very fortunate. Like, you know, I went to Selena as I was dealing with my issues and still dealing with my issues, and, you know, was extremely supportive, you know, identified with me, you know, took a bunch of things off my plate to try to help me, you know, get back going. And that's still an ongoing process. And I'm super fortunate to have that.
Yep.
You know, because there's enough stuff that's struggling around in my mind right now that, like, to add that on top of it and that pressure probably be enough to just topple me completely, to be, you know, fully honest. And so I think making sure from a university perspective that is a priority, that the people who are going to be in charge of supervising have that training and that compassion.
Yeah.
I think that's clutch.
Yeah, putting the structures in position so that professors and staff and everything can act, and also understanding what a crisis mode is, right? Your student is not mentally ill in a pejorative way when they come to you and they're like, I'm living a crisis situation right now and I would like some time off or whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like taking this seriously and having in the institution and in the bylaws something written about we're allowed to not feel well sometimes would be a big step ahead.
Yeah. 100%.
It's I think it's nice to talk about these different changes in the system that we can have, but the changes and differences are not there. What can we do to make these changes happen right now? Not right now, of course. Things won't happen like tomorrow or like at the second, but what can current graduate students start to think about or start doing so that things start to change a little bit more? I think one example would be to get involved in student societies, for example. Yeah. If you get involved in student societies, you have a little bit more leverage to do things.
Yep. And I think also, like, from a personal standpoint, I've always been very involved both during my master's and now. I think it's also a great way to help to build your social support network. Like, you know, you're kind of selecting for the people that want to socialize and get involved. And so, you know, not only are you giving yourself more of a voice, but I think from a personal perspective, it also helps to build that support network for yourself. And I think then as a student association, you can advocate up the chain, you know, to a department level, to, you know, university-wide graduate student association, and then, you know, further up into, you know, dean, president, etc. But I think also, you know, we can make changes through those entities as well, and in terms of building a stronger, you know, social connective fabric across the department, building cohorts and culture, so you're not just walking the halls with strangers, and you're not just going to events, you know, with your lab. And, you know, I think that, you know, in the same way that, you know, when you're talking about undergrad learning and achievement and grades take precedence over learning, sometimes the Graduate Student Association, you can get so caught up in attendance and, you know, what you've done that can go on your CV that you forget about the people. And I think if we can reframe that, if you do get involved in those sorts of entities in terms of how can we best support the people that are here, then you can also make that change on a more local level too.
Another thing that I think would be interesting is there's a lot of graduate students and postdocs, for example, that think of getting a PI position that are now the new generation. They're getting aware of, like, they're more aware of this problem. It's just encouraging those people. If you think of having a PI position or continuing academia, once you get there, still don't forget that. Keep that in mind, do the difference. With your new students, be that cool PI that is, it's aware of mental health and it's supportive of like, a healthy lifestyle, healthy environment. And just talking over and over with people about this topic, making it more normalized over time. We can't have change from today to tomorrow. Over time, the tendency is that things will get better. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm.
Oh, exactly. And like, if you have that dynamic, it's huge. Like I'm very fortunate that, again, my PI, those are things that she values very highly. And, it's like, she will not bring in a new graduate student unless the rest of us have approved them within our dynamic. And when things start to fall apart for me, those are the people I turn to, and you're able to kind of, connect and commiserate over some shared experience. And, like they were the ones who mentioned to me, you might want to consider doing counseling, which is something that I had never thought of before. As a man coming from a rural small town, it's really not, it was never something I've even really considered as an option for me. And having people actually bring that up was huge because, I don't know that I would have taken that step on my own. And so like having those supports is critical. And yeah, like if we can make sure that follows through as generations kind of turn over and whatnot, like it's huge.
Huge. And we were talking a few minutes ago about having a healthy lab environment. I just had a small book suggestion. There's a novel by Brendan Taylor called Real Life. And the main person there is a biochemistry graduate student who is in a toxic lab environment. He's also queer and he's having a bunch of problems. And I think it encompasses well. So if you're not a scientist, you want something that you can read and understand, but still want to dive into this topic. I think Real Life by Brendan Taylor is a good suggestion.
I'll read that. That's nice. Same. Yeah.
I have only one copy. Don't buy it.
Just another topic here. Do you guys think that the stipend that students get today plays a role into all of this?
Yes. The UC Berkley study, the people who were most affected through their mental health, anxiety, and depression, art students.
Yep.
And I think that art students, usually they're more psychologically aware, they're more likely to go to therapy, and of course I'm interpreting their data, we don't know. Yes. But my hunch is that most of the time art students and humanities students, they don't get as much of a stipend, if any stipend at all.
Yeah.
And having the financial strain through your 20s, especially if you're underprivileged, insane.
Yeah, because I mean, for us, it's like you come out of undergrad, and it's like, if you're lucky, you might have little to no debt. Other people have more debt, but now in a STEM field, the stipend is like enough that you can live fairly comfortably.
We can make means at.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't feel that I'm really lacking for a lot that I would want, compared to my friends who already have real jobs, certainly. But I'm happy with my life. But yeah, if you continue that pattern of just accumulating more debt with no end in sight, and also job prospects that also aren't typically as good after either, like, it's not a surprise to me that you're going to have a higher level of stress there.
That's I find that kind of like discouraging, because if we go on that line of thought, then people would just not go to graduate school. Yeah. It doesn't sound like a very advantageous
not very enticing.
Our sales pitch is not good here.
Why would people do that?
And you would expect that in more advanced societies, like there's the primary sector, right, extracting resources, and there's secondary sector, which is what? Transforming resources. And there's tertiary, which is services. And R&D is kind of the epitome of that. Like, it's the top. You would expect people to go towards R&D and spend all their time just pushing human knowledge forward. But somehow we've reached the apex of society and are now going down because it doesn't look like a good life to push knowledge forward further. And I pursue it, so we're still good. But
yeah. I guess then that's just another change in the system. If we want if we want to advance the knowledge even more and continue to learn more things, perhaps now talking at the governmental level, it would be interesting to have more funding for those things so that students can have a better life if we want to study more of different topics in arts or in science. Science, we're doing pretty well, at least in North America. But all the other topics, I think if we have a change in just how things work, then maybe would be more advantageous. But it sounds like today, the way that things are going, it's not the best route. But I mean, there's still people that are passionate enough for sure, clearly.
Exactly. So, but that's the thing, you need that passion.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have it and you're sitting here, year after year, potentially PhD, you're sitting for 6 years.
Yeah.
If you've got a PI that is stressing you, a lab that's not supportive, you're somewhat underfunded, and you're not passionate about it, like, you're not going to make it.
You're always on the brink of not making it. Let's finish on a positive note, maybe. More and more, I think, like, resources are getting there. Student societies are organizing. More and more, the administrations of university acknowledge the fact that mental health is important and are taking actions. The only sad part is the government is not putting more and more of its GDP in research, but that's the only sad part. For the most part, I think we're moving towards a more psychologically aware society in which we can feel comfortable about talking about our emotions. So there are things to look up to.
Mm-hmm. There's hope. Yeah.
There's hope.
The tendency is for us to go forward, right? So that's the cool part. We're going forward.
Exactly. And even just having this discussion,
it is testament of
it's one more step.
Yeah. That's an amazing topic. That was a really good idea to have this conversation, have this on an episode. Thank you, Quinn, for coming and having this conversation with us.
Thanks. Glad to be back.
Yeah. You mentioned that you're getting involved, that you're often involved in students' associations.
He's my president.
Oh, are you actually the president of the biochem?
Co-president. I can't take all the credit.
Okay.
He's my co-president. Really nice. I'm the social representative. I'm basically the cheerleader.
Vote for Quinn.
It's appointed. Okay, Quinn, thank you so much. And thank you for having the initiative of wanting to talk about this topic and for being so open with us today.
Thank you for listening to Orders of Magnitude. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast and share the episode with your friends and family. If you would like to give us feedback, you can reach us at ordersofmagnitudepod@gmail.com. We would love to hear your opinions and ideas on the subject that we discussed today. Orders of Magnitude is an original project led by Philippe Carle and Matheus Schultz. The original music was composed by Vincent Ellis. Stay tuned for the next episode coming out in 2 weeks.